Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. All right. Welcome to the May 21st, 2024 Lawrence City Commission meeting. And now Sherry will go into a rundown of the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, everyone. To minimize distractions during the meeting, please silence your cell phones. If you are attending virtually, please ensure you are muted and your video is off when you are not actively participating in the meeting. The city reserves the right to turn videos off or mute participants. When the mayor calls for public comment, please approach the podium to indicate you wish to speak. Virtual participants should use the raise hand function to indicate they wish to speak. Please leave your virtual hand raised until you are called on. The primary format for accessing or participating in this meeting is in person at City Hall. Virtual access to view or participate in the meeting cannot be guaranteed. The chat function will not be monitored. If you have any trouble, the meeting can be viewed on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please state your name and zip code before speaking, and all comments will be limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Sherry. All right, go ahead and get us started with the meeting. Item A, approve the agenda. The commission reserves the right to amend, supplement, or reorder the agenda during the meeting.
Move to approve the agenda.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's 4 affirmed with 1 absent. All right. Moving to item B, recognition proclamation and presentation. Proclaim the month of May 2024 as Mental Health Awareness Month. And I believe we have Patrick Schmitz. Yeah. Right.
Do you want me to make my comments first?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you would.
Just want to make sure the order's right. Thank you, Mayor Littlejohn, Vice Mayor Dever, and Commissioners Finkeldye and Larson, and the City Manager Owens for the opportunity to be here and recognize the May as Mental Health Awareness Month. Our theme this past year was the strength within. When someone walks through the doors of the Burton Ash Center, our hope is that they felt a strength within. The concept of strength can be deeply personal, but at its core, it embodies a sense of self-awareness and acceptance, as well as being an integral part of something greater. I am honored to be part of an organization, a community, who has used its strength of tenacity in its efforts to respond to needs, restore lives, and build a healthy community for all of Lawrence and Douglas County, and to help everyone identify and develop their inner strength. I want to celebrate some extraordinary achievements of the center this past year, all because of our collective strength. In October, we became the first fully certified community behavioral health clinic in Kansas and the first 501c3 in the nation to achieve this certification without a dedicated grant or direct state or municipal funding. This would not have been possible without all of our partnerships and your support. We are days away from the 1-year anniversary of the full opening of the Treatment and Recovery Center of Douglas County. The collaboration between all of the community partners has created a state-of-the-art crisis center in Kansas. Since beginning a phased opening in April of 2023, we have served more than 1,500 distinct individuals for 3,000 crisis episodes. And since opening the observation and stabilization units in May of 2023, we have had nearly 1,800 admissions. Most importantly, lives have been saved. Our commitment to provide permanent supportive housing with supportive services has led us to acquire land at the corner of 6th and Rockledge, which will be the home to 24 to 26 apartment units. We know that 80% of people who experience houselessness can stabilize more quickly with adequate support and opportunities. We're also excited about being a part of the city's homeless response team, which will build upon the long-standing partnerships between the city, the Burton Ash Center, and others. And finally, as to our commitment to children, teens, and their families, we were thrilled to announce in November our next endeavor, the Youth Recovery Center at 3500 Clinton Place. The Youth Recovery Center will be one of our top priorities in the coming months. Thank you, City of Lawrence, for standing with us today and into the future, empowering those in search of their inner strength, hope, and voice. Just envision the transformative power that will emerge when we unite the strength within this community to drive meaningful change to our friends, neighbors, coworkers, and families. Together, we can make it happen.
Thank you. All right. Whereas the U.S. Surgeon General states that mental health is fundamental to health, personal well-being, family, and interpersonal relationships and contributes to community and society, and whereas mental illness affects 1 in 4 Americans each year, regardless of age, gender, race, ethnicity, religion, or economic status, and whereas the U.S. Surgeon General has found a range of treatments that exist for most mental disorders and efficacy of mental health treatments are well documented, and whereas Lawrence, Kansas has made a commitment to community-based systems of mental health care for all residents, and whereas the guiding principles of community mental health care have always been comprehensiveness, cost efficiency, effective management, and high quality and consumer responsive services, and whereas the Mental Health America National Council for Community Behavioral Health Care and Burt Nash Community Mental Health Center observe Mental Health Month every May to raise awareness and understanding of mental health and illness. Now I, Bart Littlejohn, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2024 as Mental Health Month in the City of Lawrence and call upon all citizens, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools to recommit our community to increasing awareness and understanding of mental illness and the need for appropriate and accessible services for all people with mental illness. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, looks like the next one is proclaim the week of May 19th through 25th, 2024 as National Public Works Week.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I am Melissa Sieben, Director of Municipal Services and Operations, and tonight I have with me a few of my wonderful team. First, on my right, I have Angela Buzzard, who is our General Manager over Administration for our MSO department, and then Assistant Director Trevor Flynn, who is over our water wastewater area, and Evan, who will be up here later tonight to go into detail on our ADA transition plan. So we're just really happy to be here tonight to celebrate our accredited department during Public Works Week. We have over 300 employees within MSO providing public works services across 21 different programs within the city's budget. So quite a bit of activity that we bring before you on a regular basis. We are crucial to the function of the city, from supplying safe, clean drinking water to all of our residents, businesses, and visitors, as well as treating wastewater and maintaining stormwater systems throughout our community. When called, we also come out and handle trash and recycling services, as well as yard waste, and maintain things like our street lights, our roadways, the city's buildings, and our vehicles and other valuable assets for the community. We respond to community needs. That's kind of the short of it. Whether it's a water main break or snowstorm, or for that matter, tornado damage, we're here to help the city get back on its feet. We take extreme pride in our work and connecting with our residents, with the City of Lawrence, to help them be able to thrive. Lastly, we're proud of our work that our teams do every day within our community, and I'm happy to bring this request for a proclamation forward to recognize our ongoing efforts to make this a community that is well-maintained, safe, and sustainable for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is anybody else going to speak? Or, okay. Just wanted to make sure. Just wanted to make sure.
There's a few online.
All right. All right. Whereas May 19th through 25th, 2024 has been declared as National Public Works Week across the United States, and whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Lawrence, Kansas, and whereas public work professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government are responsible for building, maintaining, improving, and protecting our nation's vital transportation, water delivery, water and wastewater treatment, solid waste collection, public buildings, the city's fleets, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas, in the public interest for citizens, civic leaders, and children in Lawrence to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works in their community, and whereas the year 2024 marks the 64th annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, and whereas this year the City of Lawrence Municipal Services and Operation Department maintains the elite status of an APWA accredited agency. Now, therefore, I, Bart Littlejohn, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby designate the week of May 19th, 25th, 2024 as National Public Works Week, and urge all citizens to learn more about our essential public works professionals and recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. All right. Looks like the next one is proclaim the month of May 2024 as Building Safety Month. Hey, Brian.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Brian Jimenez, Assistant Director of Planning and Development Services. Thank you, first of all, for allowing me to speak to you briefly tonight. On a humorous side, I did shorten the proclamation from last year. In all seriousness, Building Safety Month of 2024 theme is Mission Impossible, and that basically encourages all people within our community to be aware of life safety issues, building code standards for the buildings that we live, work, play in, and so forth. I won't take much time other than to say we've had a busy start of 2024. As all of you know, we implemented a new software and licensing software to track all of our building permits and our planning stuff in PDS. And we are hopefully at the back end of that, and hopefully we will keep ironing out issues to help us give services to the community better than we ever have before. So with that, thank you.
All right. Whereas our city's continuing efforts to address the critical issues of safety, energy efficiency, and resilience in the built environment that affects our citizens both in everyday life and in times of natural disaster give us confidence that our structures are safe, sound, and whereas our confidence is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, design professionals, tradespeople, laborers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of buildings, and whereas these guardians use a governmental consensus process that brings together local, state, and federal officials with the expertise and the built environment to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect Americans in buildings where we live, work, learn, worship, play, and whereas Mission Possible, the theme for Building Safety Month 2024, encourages people to get involved in all aspects of building safety to raise awareness that building safety should never be taken for granted. Building Safety Month 2024 encourages appropriate steps everyone can take to ensure the places where we work, live, learn, worship, play, and continue to be safe and sustainable. Now, therefore, I, Bart Littlejohn, Mayor of the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of 2024 as Building Safety Month and encourage all our citizens of Lawrence to join with others across the United States in recognizing this special observance.
All right.
All right, proclaim the month of May 2024 as Historic Preservation Month.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. Lynn Braddock-Zollner, Historic Resources Administrator for the city. You know me, and I could go on a long time about historic resources in the city of Lawrence and how great it's been that the city's shown such support for the designation and protection of our cultural resources. National Historic Preservation Month is actually also sponsored by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and this year they're encouraging us to look at the individuals and groups who are actually out there doing the work and saving these historic places that tell our story. So I would just like to briefly introduce the president of the Lawrence Preservation Alliance, who is celebrating their 40th year as a preservation organization, and let him just have a few words.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mike Delaney. I'm the current president of the Preservation Alliance. And we'd like to thank the mayor and the commission for its proclamation recognizing May as National Preservation Month. Just last Friday, LPA celebrated its 40th anniversary. It was formed in 1984 to preserve historic residences in the Oriad neighborhood from demolition and redevelopment as other properties. And starting with that, with the acquisition of a single building and helping to get that rehabilitated and turned over to a new owner, the LPA has become a pretty vigorous advocate for preservation throughout the city. LPA had a role in advocating for the passage of the first preservation ordinance in the city, and then, as Lynn can attest, we were sort of a constant presence during the revision and updating, the modernization of the ordinance that came before the commission earlier this year. So we've continued to play an important role in that. We also commend the city for the specific commitments that it has made in its in Plan 2040, in its long-range plan, to push forward preservation in the city. And among those, significantly, is its commitment to identify, evaluate, designate, and preserve our community's historic resources. And in the plan, it identifies some specific strategies for doing that. And what we'd like to say is that we hope to be able to continue to partner, collaborate, provide advice, provide assistance, serve as a facilitator with the city staff and Historic Resources Commission as the city goes about trying to meet the goals that it set out for itself. So with that, thank you again for the proclamation.
Thank you. Whereas historic preservation is an effective tool for economic development, sustainable development, tourism promotion, revitalizing neighborhoods, fostering local pride, and maintaining community character while enhancing livability. And whereas historic preservation is relevant for communities across the nation, both urban and rural, and for Americans of all ages, all walks of life, and all racial and ethnic backgrounds. And whereas it is important to celebrate the role of history in our lives and the contributions made by diptychic individuals in helping to preserve the tangible aspects of heritage that have shaped us as a people. And whereas the City of Lawrence has recognized the importance of cultural resources protection since 1988 by adopting the Ordinance 5950, establishing Chapter 22 of the City Code and the Lawrence Historic Resources Commission. Whereas the City of Lawrence reaffirmed its commitment to the importance of cultural resource protection with the adoption of Ordinance 10016 on February 6, 2024. Now, therefore, I, Bart Littlejohn, City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the month of May 2024 as Historic Preservation Month and call upon all people of Lawrence to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. All right, I don't think anybody's here to speak to the League, but I'll go ahead and start in on this proclamation. Whereas the National League of Cities was founded in 1924 in Lawrence, Kansas as the American Municipal Association by state municipal leagues seeking more coordination and national representation as the city, towns, and villages expanded rapidly, and whereas the nonpartisan National League of Cities is the oldest, largest organization representing municipal governments throughout the United States, representing the interests of more than 19,000 cities, towns, and villages across the country. And whereas today, the National League of Cities works in partnership with 49 state municipal leagues across the country to strengthen local leadership, drive innovation, and influence federal policies that impact local programs and operations. And whereas the voice of the cities, towns, and villages in Washington, D.C., the National League of Cities has successfully championed federal legislative innovative solutions that support municipalities and has worked closely with Congress and the executive branch to educate policymakers on the realities of local implementation. And whereas Lawrence is a proud member of the National League of Cities and has benefited from the organization's research, technical expertise, federal advocacy, and opportunities to learn from other local governments, and whereas local governments are the bedrock of American democracy, providing 336 million residents with the most accountable, responsive, inclusive, ethical, and transparent government in the world. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City of Lawrence, Kansas, do hereby proclaim 2024 as the National Cities, Towns, and Villages Month in the celebration of America's local governments and the National League of Cities' historic centennial anniversary.
Proclamations.
What's that?
A lot of proclamations.
Yes.
You're probably tired.
I am. I need a little break. Moving on to item C, consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are considered under one motion and approved by one motion. Members of the governing body may remove items for separate discussion if desired. Members of the public may remove items identified as quasi-judicial for separate discussion if desired. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Would any of the commissioners like to pull anything from consent?
Mayor, I just have C3A. Just have a question for staff when we have a chance. Thank you.
Okay. Anything other than C3A? Not seeing any, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent agenda with the exception of C3A.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. 4 and 1 absent. Okay, C3A.
I just had a question about there's only 2 bid responses, and one was half clarity on whether why there weren't more responses, and maybe why there was such a large discrepancy in the 2, although one matched up clearly to our expectations. We only had one, and the other was double the other. So I was just curious if we're having troubles getting more responses on these kind of projects, and would like some clarity.
Well, better people than me are in the room.
Them here. So.
But I would just say that my observation has been, while we have been getting some good bids, this is not unusual in this bidding climate. I mean, the last 2 or 3 years have just been unprecedented.
This is
we see Sunflower. Sunflower has gotten a lot of our work historically. They like Lawrence. They do a lot of good bids here, and they're very familiar with us, and we're very familiar with them. That probably lends itself to them pegging the bid price, but also I don't know the other firm. Somebody may be more familiar with the other bidder on there who may be trying to get in and just was, we haven't worked with as often. That would be my response, knowing nothing else. I don't know if you all have anything else to.
Commissioners and Mayor, Melissa Sieben, Director of Municipal Services. Craig's understanding is the same as mine. This was a newer company to our process. In addition, the familiarity that Sunflower has with the pricing they've been giving us recently. And I believe we probably do have Melinda Harger on here from our CMed group who could probably go into further information on this particular one. Oh, looks like Steve Lashley.
Yeah, and I realize it's a lot of interesting, we're not doing all one thing. There's lots of varying treatments to the pavement, but some people are better at others. I just wanted to understand, because I haven't been privy to some of these lately, I just want to understand what the climate's like.
And I believe Steve, since he is on here, he does all these bids for us, would be the best one to answer
Thank you.
in more explicit detail.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, and I apologize that my connection is choppy. I think the other contractor has done work for us in the past. I'm not sure if this particular project was as desirable to them potentially. I did not do a direct inquiry with them why there's particular respective unit prices, and particular unit prices were higher than others. My guess is they were wanting to bid on the project, but at the same time, it might not have been as high a priority for them to try to attain, but they did put a bid in.
Okay.
I don't have any extensive details beyond that, but they are a company that has been a low bidder on other projects in the past.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
I'm just curious, I think this is street maintenance phase 2. Didn't Sunflower have street maintenance phase 1, Steve?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
They have, correct, they've had prior projects, several projects in the past and over the years. And so they are always competitive, and as well as Bettis, and they sometimes Bettis has won the bids, been the low bidder, and sometimes Sunflower has been the low bidder. But in this particular case, I'm not aware of specifics of why their bid ended up coming in so high. There are particular line items that are excessive, in my opinion, but other line items did, as mentioned, did line up.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay, not seeing any since this was pulled. I guess open it up for public comment. Not seeing any in the room. Sherry, any on Zoom? Oh, were you one? Yeah, sure. Okay.
Hi, my name is Alex Tempe. I live at 66046. I just want to talk about the firefighter situation.
I'm sorry, Al. That can be for open public comment. This is just specific to this consent item.
So I'm early. Yeah, my apologies, sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you. All right, Sherry, any on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay, bringing it back to us.
No, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the information and climate.
Okay, with that, I would entertain a motion.
Move to award bid 240033 for the 2024 street maintenance phase number 2 to Sunflower Paving Inc. in the amount of $3,899,854.30, and authorize the city manager to execute the construction contract, and authorize a contract in the amount of $4,100,000 to allow contingency funds for the project.
I'll second that.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed and one absent. Passes 4-0, or 4, none opposed, one absent. All right. And I'll give a chance for folks to leave the room if they need to here. Okay. I'll move us on to our regular agenda item. Receive the parking adjudication strategic plan and consider approving the parking amnesty program.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Brad Harold, Parking Manager for the City of Lawrence. I am joined virtually this evening by Allison Vaughn Ebers with Dixon Resources Unlimited and also Vicki Stanwicks with Municipal Court. Prior to starting this evening, I would like to outline what I will be presenting this evening. The parking adjudication strategic plan is for receiving the plan, and each phase of the plan will be brought back to you for approval at a future date. We are requesting an approval of the proposed parking amnesty program tonight. Connected Cities Outcome Area. The parking adjudication strategic plan is a strategy to help improve the following KPIs. Predominantly CC-2, the percentage of residents satisfied with their transportation experience driving. We also feel it touches on a couple others from a citywide perspective, mostly efficient and effective processes, and the overall satisfaction when connecting with quality of service and departments within the city. A brief history on parking in Lawrence. In 2017, we hired Desmond Design Management to create a 10-year parking operations and development plan. In 2020, during the height of the pandemic, we launched a downtown pilot ambassador program That was when parking enforcement was suspended. When it was reinstated in September, unfortunately, we had to suspend that pilot program. In 2021, we had the implementation of kiosk stations, online portal, digital permits, and also did a rate increase. In 2022, we installed our first on-street kiosk station in the 700 block of Vermont near the public library. And in 2023 of June, we relaunched the Ambassador Program, and it is fully staffed with a parking enforcement officer Tuesday through Friday now. In July of 2023, we hired Dixon to help create the adjudication parking enforcement process and review our current processes against that. August 2023 through September was our public engagement and stakeholder outreach. We did online surveys, group stakeholder meetings. Those were both in person and virtual. And that brings us to today, March 21st, the presentation. And we are hopeful for a phase 1 implementation, considering after your approval for the parking adjudication of standard parking violations in January 1 of 2025. And with that, I will hand it over to Allison with Dixon, and she will take over from here.
Thank you, Brad, and thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for letting us present this parking adjudication strategic plan for your reception. We embarked on this collaborative process with the city last year to comprehensively evaluate the city's current parking adjudication practices. This involved municipal code updates, stakeholder engagement, existing document review, policy and existing city study reviews, as well as reviewing the parking policy and procedure assessments. In August, we met with city and municipal court staff, key stakeholders, and the public in 2 community meetings. We sought their valuable feedback on their parking experience and potential changes to the citation adjudication process. This inclusive assessment has culminated in this developing of this plan. An online survey was released in August, which received an impressive 901 responses, which further enriched our findings. The next slides, we're going to delve into the results and key themes. Next slide, please. When asked about their typical purpose and how often they park in downtown Lawrence, the responses were quite telling. Most respondents indicated that they visit downtown for various reasons, such as shopping, dining, or leisure activities. And what's more is a significant 72% of people reported visiting downtown at least once per week, highlighting the regularity of their visits and the importance of the parking enforcement issue. Next slide, please. In this set of questions, we asked the respondents about their experience of receiving a parking citation. While 83% of the respondents had received a parking citation for an expired meter or parking past the time limit, only 12% had received a police style or municipal parking violation. And these violations are such as, parking in an accessible parking space or no parking zone. So pretty much any other parking violation outside of a meter violation or an overtime parking violation. Next slide, please. Of the respondents who had received a meter or overtime violation, only 14% of them appealed their citation through the city's vendor portal, which currently is Passport Parking, and even fewer, only 6% had contested their parking citation at the municipal court. Next slide. Notably, 48% of those who received a citation rated their payment experience as good or better. This positive feedback underscores the potential for a smoother and more user-friendly process in the future. As we reviewed the city's current policies for late and repeat parking offenders, we wanted to understand their experience with them. Here you can see that 92% of the respondents had never received a habitual violation, and those are violations that are issued to those who have 5 unpaid parking citations within a 30-day rolling period. And only 36% of the respondents had received a late fee for paying their citation after the deadline. And as we'll discuss a little bit later in this presentation, the survey was designed also to gauge interest in a parking citation amnesty program, which would allow those with unpaid parking citations the ability to resolve them. The results, which showed a large majority of the respondents supporting and willing to participate in such a program, are crucial in shaping the recommendations that you'll see as follows. And then lastly, this one's kind of big. We asked respondents to rank their support for these considerations, which include a smart boot process for those with delinquent citations, implementing an escalating late fee rather than visiting municipal courts, extending in-person services through parking services to get education and parking knowledge from the staff, longer deadlines to pay or appeal a citation, and the ability to manage their citations online. Next slide. So this parking adjudication strategic plan was developed to outline and recommend implementation steps and strategies to transition the city's current parking enforcement to an entirely civil administrative process. The following slides will detail in creating that new procedure for municipal parking offenses, which is intended to replace the current legal process through municipal court. This plan is really a roadmap to outline those critical decision points and should be implemented with ongoing evaluation and community feedback. As Brad mentioned, he is going to come forward with additional action items for you at future dates based off of this plan. As we went in through our research, we did find that we are limited on some violations due to the way that the Kansas State Code is written. So this plan is actually split into 2 phases, beginning with phase 1 for recommendations to update and optimize the process for paid parking and overtime violations. And then phase 2 strategies highlights the options and steps to transition your long form or police style traffic violations to a civil process. These changes are designed to both streamline operations for parking enforcement, as well as making it more efficient and user-friendly for both the city and its residents. So the first thing we wanted to do when we approached this project was to identify the overall guiding principles for this plan. And these were established as part of the overall parking experience of Lawrence and were developed based off of the stakeholder feedback as well as industry best practices. Moving forward, all decisions and adjustments within the parking program should continue to support and align with one or more of these guiding principles. So as step 1, kind of the most boring step for most people, it's important to update the municipal code. These municipal codes will support the policy changes to transition to a civil administrative process. A full review of the municipal code updates can be found in the plan. And here we're just highlighting the changes, including in implementing an escalating fee schedule for late payments, addressing the regulations for paid parking and overtime violation appeal and adjudication processes, defining habitual violators and delinquent violations, and adding the detailed processes for when a vehicle can be immobilized and or impounded. And I'll turn it back over to Brad to talk a little bit about the amnesty program.
All right, now we're going to talk about kind of how we developed it and where we're at with the current parking amnesty program. So our primary goal was both to collect the overdue fines, but more importantly, allow the opportunity for folks with an outstanding balance to resolve them and get it removed from their record. To encourage additional participation, the city will consider reducing the total amount owed and then donating a portion of that received payment to a local charity. The City of Lawrence is really excited to partner with Douglas County Community Foundation. A pantry component grant program will utilize funds to directly benefit the Lawrence community. All grant applications will be reviewed by the Douglas County Board of Directors, and this will ensure that all proceeds from the program will help fight hunger and support those most in need in our community. As you might recall from Allison's details on the survey, 87% of folks said they would participate in the program, but I want to remind everyone this does represent a very small percentage of the people with an outstanding balance. So for that, we really took, I wouldn't call it a conservative approach when we were coming up with our participation percentages. Right now, you can see there's around 800,000 in total outstanding parking violations. I think on our most recent numbers, that's a little bit higher, maybe closer to 850. While staff is very, very hopeful we can get around 30% participation in this, We think just from doing our research on amnesty programs, other municipalities that have done something similar, around 15% is a little bit more of that reasonable percentage. So assuming a 15% participation, that's 120,000. The city would be waiving off the top of that the 60,000, and then the city would retain 25%, 30,000, and that would allow us to donate 30,000, the other 25% to Douglas County Community Foundation and that grant program. And with that, I will hand it back over to Allison to finish this up.
Thank you. And so another thing that we'll need to make sure that we take care of is updating the administrative violation policies and procedures. These recommendations were developed not only in conjunction with city staff and municipal court staff, but a thorough review of how other cities process their parking citations, including Topeka, as well as various other states, such as California, Illinois. There's only a handful of states that are still out there that run their violations through municipal courts, and even less so that use it as a traffic infraction versus a civil offense. So this slide outlines these new policies and procedures, which includes implementing that escalating late fee where unpaid citations, there would be a late fee attached at day 21 and a second one attached at day 42. Violations that are past 60 days old would be considered delinquent. Those who receive a paid parking or overtime violation will be able to appeal their parking citation to parking services within 21 days of that citation being issued. There will be a number of further appeal options for people. If they're dissatisfied with their administrative review, they will be able to request an administrative hearing through a third party. We're also looking at significantly increasing the number of notices that get sent to someone who has not paid or appealed their citation, including sending a courtesy notice at day 10, which is prior to any late fee being attached, to let them know, hey, you got a citation, you might want to pay or appeal it. A second notice that would be sent to the citation, letting them know that it's now outstanding at day 31. That's after the first late fee has been applied and before the second late fee gets applied. Also, vehicles with 2 delinquent citations, so those are 2 citations that are over 60 days old that are unpaid, would receive a notice letting them know that they're getting close to being eligible to mobilization, with the hopes that they'll resolve those parking citations and be able to avoid any further action. If someone does accrue 3 unpaid parking citations that are over 60 days old, we are proposing that they would receive a notice that their vehicle is eligible to be immobilized or booted. And if they don't respond and don't pay their delinquent violations, they would receive a notice that their vehicle has been impounded. Next slide. As I touched on in the previous slide, the city has actually determined that they do want to establish multiple levels of appeal processes to provide the most customer service options to their constituents. So the first level is an administrative review. Like I said, that would be reviewed by parking services. So this is someone who knows the city, understands the parking regulations, understands everything about parking in Lawrence, and those would be received by them. They can appeal their parking citation within 21 days. They also have 21 days to pay it. So really that's kind of your first measure right there. If a person receives, that their violation has been upheld, that they haven't been dismissed, they will have the option to have an administrative hearing. And that will need to be requested within 21 days of that decision from the administrative review. The results of the hearing will be mailed to them. We are also recommending, which is common practice, that the parking penalty would be paid as a deposit. So in order to have your administrative hearing, you would pay your parking fine. And if you're found not liable, you would be refunded that amount. And then lastly, if a person is still unsatisfied with their decision from the administrative hearing, they will be able to still go to municipal court after that administrative hearing. The one thing I'd like to point out is this is a process of 1, 2, 3. You would have to do your administrative review first, then hearing, then court. You couldn't jump around within the order. Next slide. Thank you. So in order to set up an administrative process, there's very specific vendor-provided configurations that must be requested and updated in order to accommodate any new policies and procedures that are brought forward to you guys and approved. These configuration changes have been confirmed and are available from the city's current vendor and are very common with most citation management vendors out there. And these configurations that you kind of just see the highlights here are very much in line with the proposed policy changes that will be brought forward to you at a later date. Slide. As part of the initiative for equity and providing additional customer service options, an in-person parking education program where violators can schedule a meeting with parking staff to review their violation, receive guidance, and understand their parking needs to reduce or eliminate future infraction is being proposed. This is actually a really unique idea and will provide further customer service options to those who might be needing a little parking help in Lawrence. This is still under consideration, but some of the things that we have been looking at is doing in-person and virtual attendance options to be able to cover a large breadth of people, doing ad hoc meetings as well as scheduled group meetings. And then the proposed kind of outline for this is that you'll be able to take 2 violations to be waived or reduced for participation, but this would be a one-time per person offer only. So it's not every time you get a parking citation, you can go in for education, but the intent is to try to reduce or eliminate future parking infractions. You know, for someone who maybe is parking it, you know, they're an employee, they're parking in a 2-hour area. We need to show them where they can park all day and be able to avoid those parking citations. So this slide is basically a summary of the policies that we are recommending before and after. So here you can see the recommended changes versus the current policies, which extend payment and appeal timelines and options, increasing noticing for unpaid citations, adding education sessions for parking services, and expanding services through the parking services team, eliminating the notice to appear and criminal complaints with an immobilization and impound program, only for those that are delinquent and have failed to pay or appeal their parking violations. And now we're going to get into phase 2. So this is for the long form or municipal violations. So it's for pretty much all other parking violations except for meter/paid parking or overtime violations. Currently, the Kansas State Code classifies these as traffic infractions and as such requires the adjudication of these citations through the municipal court through a set policies within the code. So the first step in fully implementing a civil administrative process for all parking violations is going to be for the city to garner support from Kansas state legislation to amend the state code. Depending on what the local representative's interest is, this could come as a pilot program, or it could be as a bill to amend the existing code. By implementing phase 1, the city has a strong case to present its case for transitioning all parking citations to civil process by being able to provide tangible data on what is going to be potentially accomplished within phase 1. Additionally, highlighting those customer service improvements will also help garner its state interest. So again, a second round of municipal code will be needed to transition those remaining parking violations from that traffic offense as it's defined in a Kansas State code over to a civil violation. This is a much simpler update. This is really just this one section that would need to be updated after the first round of municipal code updates. And then here, this for consideration also, and this is again in the future, is the consideration for a second amnesty program. So during phase 1, the parking, any type of parking violation will be able to come in and participate in the amnesty program. Running a second round may be practical when transitioning all of the violations over to an administrative civil process. And you could consider different parameters for the second run. But however, you know, as you're running the first one, it'll be best to see best practices and see how the first one goes to see if anything needs to be adjusted for a potential second amnesty program. So the big thing here, this is for phase 2, for phase 1, for ongoing, for everything, is to continue to proactively notify and inform the community of changes and continue to garner their feedback on this program or these potential changes, utilizing social media, community events, business engagements, and even like traditional methods such as mailers or flyers, to provide information to the public as to what is happening, when it is happening, and how it's going to impact them. So to transition all parking violations to this administrative process, it is going to require additional staffing resources. And these resources will include hiring, training, and retaining parking enforcement officers, or as I like to call them, parking ambassadors, as well as customer service agents, people to review administrative appeals, and people to provide parking education. A lot of this is wrapped in together. Parking ambassadors in your city currently are already providing a high level of customer service. So there is some cross-training and cross-ability to be able to do some of these services within one job title. And then, as I mentioned in phase 1, again, the citation management system will need to be fully updated to follow those same processes for all violations. So the city will need to work with its vendor to determine the timeline for that transition and identify any potential issues before going live. A lot of the citation management vendors, including the one that you have, there is a great opportunity for testing and being able to make sure that the system is able to accommodate everything that it needs to do in order to transition into phase 2. And then the city currently has a different rate structure for its paid parking and overtime violations as compared to the municipal violations. While you guys should consider standardizing those violations, at a minimum, fees should be reviewed annually to determine if the city's costs are being recovered and whether or not the cost structure is effectively encouraging compliance. That's the main goal, is to get compliance. The city can also consider adjusting the fees based off of the Consumer Price Index, or the CPI, and evaluate the ongoing enforcement personnel costs required to provide enough consistent coverage to encourage compliance. And then lastly here, as the strategies are implemented and new policies are established, the city will continuously evaluate the program's effectiveness and its policies. Ongoing data collection and evaluation will ensure that the program adapts to best fit the community's needs. Rather than reacting to perceptions, parking demand management strategies are most effective when changes are made incrementally and based on data. And that's the end of our presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any questions?
A couple questions. One, I saw in the amnesty program, it says any person with a warrant, an active warrant, would be required to see the judge or post a bond. Have we talked to the judge? Is he not willing to waive anything, or is that just an assumption, or not set those aside, or?
Yeah, have Vicki answer this one.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. The judge actually is willing to work with those people. He just does require that the defendant come in and be added to the docket. He most likely will not require them to post the bond. He just wants to see them and talk to them and get them current on their court date. And then once they receive a new court date, then they can talk to the prosecutor about the amnesty program and get their fine reduced. So they won't necessarily have to post any bond, but they do have to get their warrant lifted. And in order to do that, they have to see the judge.
And would any of these warrants be just for pure unpaid parking tickets? Unpaid meter tickets?
So the warrant is for failing to appear in court.
Yes.
The charge is a criminal complaint for unpaid meter tickets, but people who owe a large amount of money on those meter tickets, a complaint is filed through the prosecutor's office for a criminal charge of overtime parking.
Okay.
So most of these people owe $500 or more, sometimes $2,000 or $3,000 in parking tickets. So a complaint is filed, they're sent a notice to appear in the mail, and then if they fail to appear on that court date, we'll send them a notice. If they don't respond to that, then a warrant's issued for their arrest for fail to appear.
Well, I'll make a comment, but I'll say this later, maybe more, but I think we want to work, I mean, some of the people who could best benefit from the amnesty program, if all they see is you're required to see the judge, you're going to get very low compliance. If we put out something a little more talking about what the judge is willing to do, you know, if you show up, you'll have a court date, you'll see the judge, he'll give you time to pay, then you can see the prosecutor. Something that might actually encourage them to show up might be worth considering in this.
Sure, I think that's absolutely a great idea. And I think that we can put language out there that would make them feel better about coming in. We certainly don't want them, what we don't want them to think is that they're going to go to jail.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see, I guess a similar question to me is and through the appeal process, I believe there's a recommendation that before the final appeal, the parking penalty is paid as a deposit.
Yes, so that would be on step 2 of the appeal, and that I think that's a common practice that we found when we did most of our reviews with other municipalities. It just allows that it sets the precedent that you've already had one level of appeal that was unfortunately denied. Level 2 is I think the percentage of those that would actually be accepted is a little lower, as it's already been reviewed by a parking professional, but that allows the city to retain that payment, and also. I think there's some benefits that also reduce the possibility of a potential down the road for a person to be demobilized by not paying that citation ultimately if they do not get their appeal accepted, if that makes sense.
Do you know if there would be in anticipation of any waiver process for that? I mean, I'm always concerned about, paying for the right to appeal. I don't want to bar someone from appealing if they can't afford it. I understand that point, but you think there's any sort of exception to that waiver process?
Yeah, I think there's an opportunity for us to figure out what works best for Lawrence. So if your recommendation is that we didn't really like that particular portion of our presentation, or some type of movement that we could do to make it a little easier or a little bit more inviting, maybe that just moves from the secondary appeal to the third appeal, or it goes away completely. That's completely up to your discretion on what you guys feel like would be best from that standpoint.
And I'll just add to that point too, one of the states that has probably the most comprehensive civil administrative process is California. And in California, it's actually required by state law that there is a waiver process for their second level. And it's a pretty simple waiver process. And that's something that I think could easily be implemented, and a huge benefit for those who may not have the funds to be able to pay for that deposit.
I'd be interested in seeing that at least. Last question. And Brad, you would have to comment on whether or not you think this is a good idea or not. But during the code development process, there's been some discussion about implementing a parking permit system, maybe in particular neighborhoods, or some sort of permit system. Anything that you've learned in this would, if we did that, and if we had a, parking enforcement in the neighborhood, for example, on a parking permit, would there be anything that would stop us from using this system and that kind of park permit?
Really glad you asked. So that is what I'm really hoping that kind of leapfrogs us into that next project, which is a neighborhood permitting program. And in my conversations with our neighborhood associations, that's what we talked about. We're kind of setting that administrative process for all citations. I think we can make zones outside of our downtown right now is what we're predominantly focused on. But I think this allows us the opportunity to expand that out into those neighborhoods and make those citations or potential citations also administrative process as well. So I think it could fit right back into what we're considering right here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Please. I just have one question about if you miss the primary 21-day period for an appeal, I guess, what happens? You just have no...
So there is that's when after you miss the first appeal deadline, that's when your first late fee is assessed. So that's $15 more on the violation. And then you still have the opportunity, you need to pay that prior to the last, the secondary late fee, excuse me. But you have the opportunity to still call, get educated, do all the things that we discussed. Like a person could still come in for our one-on-one parking and education program, have that discussion, see if we can help them avoid that particular one violation. And that just goes into, our ultimate goal is to encourage compliance, not force somebody to pay a violation. That's an opportunity for us to educate and remove that violation from them. So there still are appeal options. They're just a little bit different than they're outlined in the official appeal process, if that makes sense.
So you're going to send out notices, you're 10 days late, hopefully we'll move this from 10 days to 21 days. You'll send out a notice, pay or appeal, maybe there's a button to do whatever, but we can give them equal opportunity to do both simultaneously, right?
Absolutely. And one of the primary changes with our notice is sending those notices prior to late fees being assessed. Right. So historically, you didn't get that notice until your citation was, late. And then you would get a notice saying you were late, and there was no option at that point on for you to help. So we're sending out that notice at 10 days to allow the opportunity for people to pay prior to getting that late notice, and they will be well informed of when that late notice would actually occur to the violation that's not paid.
Well, and also to appeal, because maybe they're in a position where they didn't see the ticket, they had no knowledge of it, and maybe they want to pay for it, or they may want to appeal it, but I just want to give them equal opportunity so that if we're not going to give them the right to appeal or get the same rights if you are within 21 days, we should make it equally easy to appeal or pay simultaneously. That's the only thing I want to make sure.
Yep, absolutely.
That's the only thing I want to add. Thank you.
Did you have me?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
So I have a couple questions on, Commissioner Finkel and I was talking about the permit parking in the neighborhoods. I thought that was already part of that parking plan we did back in 2017 or 19.
It's certainly been part of our plan. We really hoped that this process of making it a more of a civil process would help us in that effort. I do have a number of documents already related to that, as I plan to in the very near future bring that before you as a consideration for the neighborhood permitting stuff. I believe we need to do a little bit more community engagement. Again, that was a while when we last had those conversations. I want to make sure that the neighborhoods and neighborhood associations are very familiar of what I would be recommending, and I have a lot of that already created. So, bridging that communication gap and starting the conversation again will be really important before we move forward with recommendations related to it. But yes, it is certainly in the works.
Okay, great. So I had a question about the notifications a little bit. What I'm reading here is that up to 6 notifications can be sent. That seems like a lot, so maybe you can help me understand at what phases that you would be sending out these notifications, especially for a $10 ticket or whatever.
The primary reason for the what we'll call extensive communication effort related to it as notices is because the last thing that the parking division or the city of Lawrence wants to do is to ever put a boot on a vehicle in downtown Lawrence. Our primary goal is to tell you the reason why you received a violation, how you can appeal the violation, how you can settle the violation, long before, as a last resort, we need to put a boot on the vehicle. So there's an opportunity to reduce that. I do feel that it's a little extensive with 6 total, but again, I think that's a testament to us really trying to avoid the unfortunate introduction of a boot on a vehicle.
So those go out by mail? Is that how those are sent out?
Yeah, they go out by mail. We're also considering some other options through our online permit program. So in the event that a person does have a permit, we might be able to also utilize email and other things like that to try to help bridge that communication gap as well. So we do have a little bit of that data available.
Okay, got it. And one thing I noticed is they spoke that we would need to hire more staff. How many staff would we need to hire?
A lot of that is, there's been a lot of discussion around staff, and right now the parking fund does pay for 2 municipal court clerks, and that is because they are still doing a substantial amount of the parking interactions with the customer window, and also all municipal violations that my parking enforcement staff is issuing in downtown Lawrence are still being processed at that window. And so if we move forward with this program or plan as you see fit, there's still going to be a need for the municipal court clerks as they're trying to process and catch up everything that's still in the queue. But we're expecting some more customer service support needed in our parking division. So we're moving that out of municipal court and their walk-up window and actually creating a similar walk-up window in downtown Lawrence at the New Hampshire Street garage at our office. And so right now the admin is myself and one administrative assistant, and we had just brought in a new enforcement supervisor to help on the enforcement side. So from an admin side, we're a little thin, and if we are introducing these added customer service experiences, like coming in and talking to a parking professional, learning where you can park and avoiding those violations, we are expecting more calls and more foot traffic from that standpoint. So I'm hopeful that can be one, or even utilize maybe a part-time or a temp staff to bridge the gap until we really have a good idea of what our staffing needs are moving forward, if that makes.
So if this gets approved, we don't know what the cost's going to be. That's what I'm hearing. Maybe you can help me.
Well, for planning for 2025, we did put a little bit of money in the operating budget for a temp service to support from an admin side in the event that we needed it. It did mean that we have to hire someone. We're not requesting a full-time employee at this time. This would just be a temp service to help us kind of bridge that gap to get a better understanding of what we need from an admin perspective. So right now, I don't know if that's 2 full-time employees or 1 full-time employee or a part-time employee. And I think that just gives us a little bit of flexibility moving into 2025 budget to bridge that gap from a staffing standpoint.
Okay, thanks.
I just had one question. I think I heard during the presentation that we're not quite there in standardizing parking violation fines. I was just wondering how far off we are or how much it'll take to get us there.
Yeah, so right now what we call long form violations, other municipalities call them police style violations, those are currently $55. So not all, I mean, if you get an ADA stall violation, that is $100. But $55 compared to our standard parking violations of 10 is a rather large gap. And it's really one of the pain points that we've heard from visitors to our community that go, and I parked in between 2 meters and I got a $55 ticket, but if I were parked one way or the other, it would have been 10, and trying to describe that. And so I think that's what, we were trying to bring to light, was that right now that discrepancy between those 2 violations is very large. And so in the event that we reviewed all parking violations and brought them a little bit more to where it felt like it was, maybe it's $25 and $10 or somewhere along that, to bridge that gap where it is a little bit more standard across our parking violations.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? All right, I'm not seeing any. All right, and I'll go ahead and move us to public comment on this. Not seeing here any in the room. Sherry, any on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay, I'll go ahead and bring us back. Any further discussion on this?
I guess I'd just say, obviously, thank you for the work. Thank you for the progress. Obviously, we're going to see more of these as we get farther down the line. Certainly support the amnesty program, see where we can come in, and to Commissioner Lawson's point, that might help fund a temporary position going forward. And then otherwise, I think I weaved my comments in with my questions, which I'd be interested on the warrants, a little better process on the some sort of waiver for the paying the penalty, and then certainly appreciative as I have more and more conversations about permits in the neighborhoods, how we might make that work and how this would fit in with that, and certainly one of the concerns about permits is, criminal violations, and so having a process like this helps that go much smoother. So appreciate the work, looking forward to seeing the rest of it, but as for tonight, I certainly support the amnesty program.
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like we have a few details to work out, but I support all this, and I think it's a great step forward to standardizing the way things operate, but also maybe providing us a way to actually collect some of these outstanding debts and make it easier for people to, give a one-time option when they have a problem. It might be a good political opportunity for us. And then, of course, the off-street parking and the non-standard parking issues, we should probably resolve those somehow, especially if we're not involving police or public safety in this. We're really more dealing with this at an administrative level once a citation is issued. So I really appreciated the presentation. It was really thorough and really well put together. I appreciate that very much.
I have one more question for you, Brett. So we talked about the permit parking for the neighborhoods. Do you know when that might be coming forward?
I have been focusing most of my energy on this, but now that that's freed up, I'm very hopeful that that's probably sometime in early 2025. I can at least bring a concept where we can start the discussion and start to make sure that we have it where you guys are. I'm heading the right direction as what you guys envisioned. So I'm hopeful that's in 2025.
Okay, because I'm really interested in getting that going since that was in the original report to have that program. I think, this type of a program, I think, is important, and obviously a lot of thought's gone on how to implement it and roll it out. Still concerned that we don't know what it's going to cost, and so we're asked to prove something that we think maybe we might, have some idea, but it would have been nice to hear a little bit more about the actual what it would cost us. But I'm going to support this because I think it's the way we're headed, and we need to go. So.
Additionally, I'll go ahead and support it as well. It's kind of catching us up to what other municipalities across the nation are doing and bringing it over to the administrative side, lessening the stress on our court folks. And I'll be interested to see that neighborhood aspect, as Commissioner Larson mentioned, and as well as what exactly how much staff we're going to end up utilizing, or what the end point of that is going to be. But I'll certainly approve it because I think all of you guys have done a great job in putting together this information, and I've been really impressed. And it's a lot to it'll move us in a really good direction.
Yeah. Lisa, I will add, as it relates to that neighborhood permitting program, if we were looking to take over parking enforcement across the city, to give you an idea of the call volume, the Lawrence Police Department fields about 1,300 parking-related calls per month. So right now, our administrative staff obviously wouldn't be able to handle that call log, and I don't expect that for phase one of this, but certainly know that we will expect some more calls and more emails related to parking. So thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. With that, I would entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the staff recommended parking citation amnesty program.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4 with 1 absent. All right. Moving us on to item F, work session. The work session provides an opportunity for the City Commission to discuss items in greater detail. The Commission will take no binding action on items presented during this time. Work session topics are eligible for public comment. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. And our work session item is Receive Connected City Update on Americans with Disability Act, ADA, Transition Plan for the Public Right-of-Way, and provide feedback.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We are here tonight to provide a connected city update, but also to address our ADA transition plan for public right-of-ways. Melissa Sieben, again, Director of Municipal Services and Operations. I'm happy to be here tonight to introduce Evan Carenta, our ADA Compliance Administrator with the City of Lawrence. He has been working diligently to complete a series of important documents to help guide the city's effort related to ADA accessibility. The City of Lawrence has been working on addressing the ADA since it was implemented in 1991. In 2022, you may recall the city adopted the city's ADA transition plan for facilities, which further defines what remains to be done to improve the city facilities. Tonight, we're here to present the city's ADA right-of-way transition plan for sidewalks and curb ramp infrastructure. As Evan will address, there is significant work remaining for the city of Lawrence to achieve accessibility within our public rights-of-way. To get to this point tonight, Evan has brought together a cross-departmental team to work on this challenge and engaged with the community regarding the needs of our public rights-of-way for compliance with the ADA. We look forward tonight to sharing this information with the commission and the fiscal impact that needs to be addressed to remediate these impediments for our community, for everyone. Evan.
I think this is low enough. All right. All right, good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Evan Corrent, and I'm the city's ADA Compliance Administrator. And as Melissa mentioned, tonight we're going to talk about our Americans with Disabilities Act ADA Transition Plan for the Public Right-of-Way. So a little bit of overview and what the presentation will cover is ADA Transition Plan background, our curb ramp and sidewalk evaluation methods and findings, the demand, demographic, and route prioritization methods, and then cost projections and funding recommendations. And as Melissa mentioned, that this has been a long process, and I just wanted to take a minute to quickly recognize all the members of the team that have helped draft and develop this plan over the years. It's been a long road. So the purpose of the ADA transition plan is to ensure safe, accessible, and usable travel paths in the public right-of-way for all people, including people with disabilities, and really taking a community for all approach, which is fundamental to the equity and inclusion commitment in the city's strategic plan. This plan also outlines a 6-step process to address the maintenance backlog, set priorities, and establish an overall funding plan. A little additional background. So when we look at regulatory compliance of the ADA, federal ADA law requires that state and local governments, which is Title II of the ADA, have transition plans for their facilities, services, and programs. And under the definition of a facility or program, sidewalks and curb ramps are included in that facility or program. So they are needed to have a transition plan to reach compliance. Additionally, when you look at state statute and city ordinance, both require that any sidewalks that are unsafe or inadequate for pedestrian travel need to be either repaired or replaced to meet city accessibility standards. Also, we look at our strategic plan alignment. The connected city outcome envisions the city of Lawrence having a well-maintained, functional, and efficient infrastructure, facilities, and other assets, as well as our equity and inclusion commitment, which means a fair and impartial delivery of services so that no group is disadvantaged or burdened, with inclusive representation and participation for all. So federal requirements of what an ADA transition plan must contain. So our self-evaluation, which is a thorough evaluation of all of our sidewalks and curb ramps, and from that we can actually see what's accessible, what's not accessible, and still needs to have work done. The methods for achieving compliance. So again, this is either whether it's going to need to be repaired or replaced to meet accessibility standards. A schedule for implementation. So when are we going to start? How long is it going to take? And then community engagement that we'll talk a little bit about further on. So some of the challenges with our ADA transition plan, obviously pre-ADA neighborhoods with aging infrastructure that are in poor condition. Budget constraints over the years and a lack of a comprehensive program means that much of the work in Lawrence has been deferred and kind of I know you've heard this before, kick the can down the road, and this is where we are now. Also dynamic needs with destination demand changes over time, so the plan must remain flexible to prioritize the greatest areas of needs. So for instance, schools closing, school opening, healthcare facilities moving or changing locations. So we have to continue to kind of change as the city of Lawrence grows and changes. So the 6 steps that you'll see in the ADA transition plan are broken down into these 6 different categories. evaluation, which is again the collecting of all the data and of our existing infrastructure, and then actually assigning categories based on the defects that we'd found in those areas. Our prioritization methodology, which is identifying high priority areas using an established criteria that we'll get into further later on. Selecting strategies, again, whether this is going to be repair or full block-end-to-block-end replacement. Coordinating our efforts, so making sure that we're pairing up with other projects that are happening in the community, so we're taking a complete corridor approach, so we only have to be in an area once. Execute, so establish timelines and secure funding through the city's capital planning process. And for this plan, we've actually selected a 20-year timeline that you'll see in the plan. And then reevaluate the plan periodically as the city of Lawrence changes and grows. So some of our evaluation methods, we actually use LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging tool. It's actually a tool that's hooked onto a slowly moving vehicle, and it can actually pick up kind of all the different access points. And as you can see, that picture in the top right, it kind of looks like a 3D pixelated image, and it's actually millions of data access points that can tell you things like slope, cross slope, vertical separation, horizontal gaps, sidewalk width. So from that, it really kind of helped save us the time of having to walk kind of all 400 miles of sidewalks and shared use paths we have in town, and really gave us a baseline of kind of what we were looking at, what was currently accessible, and what needed improvements. And as well as community input, the city conducted outreach and public comment opportunities over the last couple of years. Some of those were the citywide accessibility survey, also last year the sidewalk improvement plan, a sidewalk survey, and then we've also done a lot of tabling and outreach events as part of the Lawrence pedestrian planning. And then most recently, the Brick Sidewalks and Streets Planning Committee, where we've done outreach and kind of survey results on kind of what people were looking for in sidewalk infrastructure. So condition evaluation categories. So in the plan, we took both curb ramps and sidewalks, and we ranked them on a scale from 1 to 6 based on their condition. So 1 is being the least accessible, 6 being the most accessible. And so when we look at kind of some examples of our curb ramp categories, you can see category 1 there, least accessible you can get, no curb ramp. Category 2, a curb ramp with significant deterioration. Category 3, a curb ramp with no detectable warning. And if you're not familiar with the detectable warning, it's the tactile domes that are at crosswalks, and what they are is they allow somebody who is blind or with a significant visual impairment, it alerts them to know that when they feel that either with a white cane or their foot, that they should either stop or yield because they're about to continue through vehicular traffic. It also gives them an opportunity to be seen by vehicular traffic. So somebody that's waiting there can actually see that there's a person about to cross. So it kind of just gives a little protection for both the pedestrian and the driver. And then category 4, you have a curb ramp that has 1 or more areas of concern. So they don't have the level landing spots on the top of the curb ramps. So actually, after you kind of push up the ramp, there's not a level landing to rest on. It's actually a diagonal curb ramp that has been designed, so as you can see, it tends to lead people out into the middle of the street versus being directional, which actually points them in the specific direction that they should cross. Again, this has no detectable warning strips, and it may also have cross slope or running slope issues. Category 5, a curb ramp without the required counter slope. And that's actually where the downward slope of a ramp meets the adjacent street. So as you can see, if you have too much of a drastic connection there, it could actually catch the front of a mobility device and flip somebody forward out of their chair. So it's recommended that you actually have a strip there that kind of levels off at the bottom of the curb ramp before you kind of continue on in the street level. And then category 6, a fully accessible curb ramp. And so we did the same thing for our sidewalk categories. So category 1, less than 48 inches wide. And as you can see, the community members and pedestrians have actually made their own little goat path there because of the lack of width in the sidewalk. And one of the reasons why that can be so challenging from an accessibility standpoint is if you had somebody in a mobility device and the weather wasn't good, it looks like it may even be muddy here, and they had to kind of cheat over and they could get stuck or get hung up. So that's category 1. Category 2, the sidewalk has vertical separations. So again, these are sometimes known as trip hazards, or something that can catch a pedestrian's toe, or again, a mobility device. Category 3, where you have poor condition, so either significant deterioration or multiple cracks or horizontal separation. Category 4, the sidewalk's cross slope. So as you can see, that the slope of that sidewalk is actually pointing down towards the street, so it's causing significant cross slope. So particularly a manual wheelchair user is kind of always having to fight that downward slope coming on. So, if they're going, one way, their one arm gets pretty tired by the time they're at the end of that sidewalk. And then category 5, you have vegetation or overgrowth. Again, can cause accessibility issues. And then category 6, a newly constructed ADA accessible sidewalk. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the brick sidewalk policy development. It's still underway. The sidewalk policy is being developed by staff with guidance from a subcommittee and the public. And the goal of the draft is to have a policy that reflects the community's values, priorities, and has practical implementation strategies for the city. The outcome of that policy will be to have a citywide brick, street, and sidewalk policy design standards, as well as a policy map and a staff report that includes the public engagement process and the topic history. The timeline for that development or that adoption is the fall of 2024, and there's more information on the project website there. So condition evaluation findings. So after we did kind of all this evaluating and what does the condition look like and where does Lawrence sit right now? So of the 400 plus miles of sidewalks and 6,500 curb ramps that we evaluated, about 30% of our sidewalks and about 30% of our curb ramps meet accessibility requirements. So current conditions, we have about 4,500 curb ramps that either need to be repaired or replaced, and about 280 miles left of sidewalks and shared use paths that need improvements. 182 miles, or 65% of those sidewalks, require repair, and about 35% require full replacement. So one of the things that we also took into consideration in this plan is demand and demographic evaluation categories, similar to what the Lawrence pedestrian plan uses and the current sidewalk improvement program uses, which is pedestrian demand. So how close are pedestrians within a half mile of locations serving public schools, transit or bus stops, parks and attractions or other amenities, government facilities, healthcare, retail, major employers. And then we also look at transportation disadvantaged areas, so households that have a person with a disability, households that have somebody with less than a high school education, minorities, single-family households, zero-vehicle households, or low to moderate income, or area or populations where you have under 18 or over 65. So when we get to the route selection, we're going to identify routes on a 5-year cycle according to the established prioritization criteria. So again, that takes in not only condition, but that takes in pedestrian demand and transportation disadvantaged areas. And we continue to run matrix to see where are the best areas that we can be in for the next kind of 5 years. And then in the 4th year, every 4th year of that plan, we'll kind of identify the next 5. But one thing I want to caution is that, as I mentioned, things are always changing. So sometimes pedestrian demand or transportation disadvantages areas may change based on kind of demographics of a neighborhood, or again, schools are closing, healthcare, something like that is changing. So we're always going to want to be running those matrix to make sure that we're kind of in the best areas that we can be and adjusting as needed. And again, that map is just a sample, so don't strain your eyes too much. That's not a current, that's just a picture. So low-cost strategies to enhance accessibility. So resident-provided maintenance. So things like snow removal, ice removal, or excessive ponding due to irrigation or vegetation overgrowth or landscape. As well as signal timing is another cost-effective strategy that the city can do, where we can actually test and change signal timing at particularly busy intersections or crosswalks to make sure that we are allowing people, particularly people with mobility devices, a safe amount of time to cross busy intersections. So here's an example of some things that we did with a couple community members that use different mobility devices, and and actually timed it, and did you feel comfortable? Did you feel safe? Was it adequate timing? And those are things that we can kind of do on our end that are low-cost strategies. So our current funding strategies for new and existing sidewalk infrastructure. So on the left there, you have existing sidewalks and ADA curb ramps. So we currently have 5 different programs that address sidewalks or curb ramps in our community. We have the Sidewalk Improvement Program, we have the ADA Brick Sidewalk Program, ADA Sidewalk Reconstruction Program, ADA Curb Ramp Program, and the Sidewalk Emergent Repair Program. And one of the goals of this plan is to actually roll those all into one comprehensive plan instead of having multiple different plans with different funding streams that are kind of all after the same thing. And then in addition to kind of those 5 separate projects, there's also other ways that you can achieve accessibility in existing sidewalk infrastructure. So it could be reconstruction as part of a roadway project or street project. So depending on the major reconstruction that a street or a roadway is getting, at a minimum, they would be required to install new ADA accessible curb ramps. And sometimes, depending on the scope of work and kind of the detail of what they're getting into, it could involve sidewalk infrastructure as well. So in a lot of cases, our street maintenance projects that are, kind of more than kind of just routine maintenance or a major alteration will at a minimum get new accessible ADA curb ramps. And then when you look at city maintenance or repair projects, so this may be if we're doing underground infrastructure, so if we're tearing up a corner curb to do some underground infrastructure work, when they're finished with that work, they would obviously put back a new accessible ADA curb ramp or whatever section of sidewalk that they disturbed. And then we have private development or redevelopment, so if anywhere that they were coming in and doing development or redevelopment of an area and there was existing sidewalk infrastructure, it could be flagged to be made ADA accessible or improvements made to the surrounding area that they're developing. And then sidewalk gap projects. So when we look at gaps, so I'm talking about where sidewalks have never existed. I'm not talking about just deteriorated and now they're not there anymore, but where sidewalks were never constructed or built. So they're not included in the ADA transition plan because the ADA transition plan is for existing sidewalk infrastructure. But we see how big sidewalk gap is and having a complete network, and if you have areas of town that never had sidewalk or constructed sidewalk. So we wanted to at least make sure that we listed some of the ways that we're addressing sidewalk gap. So the five-year bike pedestrian program, and then we also have the Lawrence Pedestrian Plan Priority Sidewalk Network, and then new construction and roadway projects. So if they're doing kind of new construction, if they're extending an area of town or doing something like that, so they're building new roadway projects, they would be required to have accessible infrastructure, including curb ramps and sidewalks. And then private development or redevelopment. So if a developer is building a new neighborhood, it would depend on kind of what the development code comes up with on, are we going to have sidewalks on one side, both sides, and then how does it connect to kind of current neighborhoods or the infrastructure around it. So for our program cost estimate assumptions, we used 5 years of the sidewalk improvement program to project cost estimates. So just over 1,500 property owners had their sidewalks repaired from 2019 to 2023. The average cost per property for the adjacent property owners was about $660. And again, there was a financial aid program available for the sidewalk improvement program, and we will continue to have that available for the ADA transition plan as well. And then we actually used, to get some of our cost assumptions, a recent block end to block end ADA reconstruction project that we did along Kentucky Street, where they did a full ADA reconstruction project, but adjacent property owners still only were required to contribute to the identified hazards adjacent to their properties. So it was the same process as the sidewalk improvement program. So there was no change in structure or payment obligation from adjacent property owners, and they didn't, from an average standpoint, it averaged to be the same amount that they would pay for the sidewalk improvement program, but they saw that their whole block end to block end was reconstructed to ADA. So not much difference for adjacent property owners. The difference was really on the city side. So when we looked at that project, about 85% of that was funded by the city and about 15% was adjacent property owners. So some of our program cost estimate and variables, and this can change not only year to year, but project to project, concrete costs, significant grading needs. So again, this would be if we're having to do block end to block end reconstruction, we need to make sure that we have the grading in the right areas so we can achieve the slope and cross slope that we need. So that may also include retaining walls. The complexity of the curb ramps in that area, not every curb ramp is the same. You know, a lot of that is based on kind of how it connects with street infrastructure and the infrastructure around it. So they're not all the same. Whatever happens with the brick policy and kind of how that guides some of our funding strategies moving forward. Number of driveway approaches along a corridor. So if you are in a block that only has a couple, it's going to be obviously less costly than if you have to repair 15 within a sidewalk corridor. Any underground infrastructure, either that needs to be moved or relocated to get the desired slope or cross slope or widths that we need, and then any traffic control. And then Angela is about to come up here and talk about some of the cost estimates for this program. And just to clarify that these cost estimates are for 2024 values.
Well, I'm moving this up. I just want to give kudos to Evan. As you saw through that 40-plus page document, a lot of work has gone in to developing this transition plan, and we greatly appreciate all his work and the work of the steering committee in pulling it together. So I got tagged to do the fun part of the presentation and telling us how much all of this is going to cost. 280 miles of sidewalks and 4,500 curb ramps is no small feat to tackle. And that's why, as Evan mentioned, kind of looking at that sweet spot between financial sustainability as well as trying to bring the community into compliance as quickly as possible. That 20-year timeline is what staff is working on as a part of this recommendation. So there's probably a multitude of different ways to look at this. We have narrowed it down to two funding options. One is building off of the success of the Sidewalk Improvement Program and continuing those community dialogues that I wasn't part of, but I've heard a lot about that went into establishing how that program was put together and why it was important to have a component of resident cost share as a part of that. Obviously, the city could also choose not cost partnering, and so those are the two options here. I'll provide a little bit of context so we can piece them together. Overall, with all of the data that Evan was talking about and the condition analysis and some great work of our GIS team, really it's actually gotten some national attention with the work that we've done in costing out the work that needs to be done on pinpointing how much this is going to be put together with the LiDAR data and a lot of things. It's a little over $87 million to bring us into compliance with current standards. So that's our top line there. Design costs come in at about 10%, so those are going to be the same between both programs. The differential factor you'll see there is the administrative costs. We actually put quite a bit of time into to figuring out how much time it is to administer a program with a cost share, as well as not having one. And there is quite a bit of time. It's about double as what we found in education with those property owners, reviewing the documentation, processing their payments. There's a lot of touch points that happen within that, so we did estimate that administrative cost being about twice as much. So that brings you to the middle there of our total program cost, with cost partnering being a little over $103 million, not cost partnering being just shy of $100 million. The resident contribution is estimated at about $13 million over the 20-year life cycle of the program. So when we factor that in, if we're looking at apples to apples, so the total city cost contribution on the 20-year project is a little over $90 million with cost partnering, whereas it's going to obviously remain at that $100 million mark if we're not cost partnering. So that's kind of the differentiating components there as we look at the two different structures that we're bringing forward, staff recommendation being continuing the cost partnering. $90 million is no small task to undertake, but the good news is we have been investing in a number of ways related to our right-of-way infrastructure, as Evan talked about. I'm just going to highlight those same programs with some dollars attached to them. We have 5 programs that we invest in on an annual basis, at least for the last 5 years or so, and that's the 2 in the CIP, Sidewalk Improvement Program, we've been talking a lot about tonight, as well as the Brick Sidewalk Program. You can see where those come in at. Then there's 3 allocations of dollars we make through the annual operating budget, with those 3 being listed there, and Evan highlighted them earlier. Total investment we make annually is a little over $1.9 million. So as Evan mentioned, our goal would be to combine those together. So we're using one methodology process, one prioritization, and pinpointing those areas in our community that we need to address first based on a more comprehensive approach, and less piecemeal. So if we carried forward that current investment of $1.9 million, and then I'll point you to line 3 there, add into that the about $650,000 we anticipate getting from our resident contribution each year, it leaves us with our second line gap of the $2.588 million. So our total program cost is a little over $5.1 million to get us to our 20-year total of $103 million. So to review that again, there's a lot of numbers. We're looking at allocating $5.1 million annually, currently investing $1.9 already, cost partnering with our residents $650. So that leaves us with a capital improvement plan gap of just under $2.6 million. So we also recognize that's no easy task right now in our current environment. These would obviously be general fund dollars, or not tied to any enterprise revenue sources that we have. And so obviously, as a part of the CIP process, we could allocate all $2.5 million annually, but staff did put forward in the current CIP a ramp-up approach to maybe ease us into that full allocation annually. So it could be done a number of different ways. We're recommending a 25% start off in 25, going up 25% each year until we get to the full allocation in 2028. So that's what you'll actually see that's been represented in the CIP. Obviously, if we're starting off with lower dollars in the earlier years, it's going to extend the timeline, probably about a year, give or take, on getting everything done in that timeline. So we'd be looking a little over 21 years. And we certainly couldn't, we've talked about the dollars and what this looks like, but we don't want to go backwards after we get certainly new projects into compliance, as well as really looking at that 30% of our sidewalks and curb ramps that are already in compliance. And really putting forward not only a construction program to start doing more work to repair and replace these areas, but also an annual inspections program so that we can catch things as they come up earlier when they're lower cost, and work with those property owners at that time, and notification related within our current ordinances that we already have in place. I will be frank in saying that we haven't worked out all the details of what that looks like, but we do feel like we have capacity to be able to look at that with temporary staff and intern staff to be able to really get a visual inspection of these sidewalks on an annual basis, so that we can keep more maintenance and partnership with these properties on the front end, so we don't get ourselves in the situation that we are now with deferring that into the future. So tonight, the last couple slides I just wanted to highlight. So next steps as a part of this, obviously this is a work session. We're here to get your feedback as a part of this and make adjustments accordingly. But really the rubber will meet the road as a part of the CIP process. So like I've mentioned, that usually comes to you in June. And so at that process, you'll see that we have some numbers allocated in there, which based on your feedback tonight may stay or may change. But that would be the next step related to the transition plan as a whole. And then the transition plan itself, we haven't talked a lot about this document that's been created, but that is something we're really proud of, and we want to bring forward to you as a part of a regular agenda item, probably in July or something of that time frame. To have you officially adopt it and it be a resolution of the governing body stating, that we are wanting to make strides in this area and move compliance forward. So that would be at least a couple times that you'll see this in front of you in different ways. So lastly, I will end just by saying that we really appreciate the opportunity to present this to you tonight. So Melissa, Evan, and myself are certainly here to answer your questions, but we have several folks online that have been involved in various phases of sidewalks and right-of-way improvements in our community. So hopefully we can answer your questions, and if not, we'll certainly take our time to get those answers back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
I got one. So the $103 million projected for 20 years, is that take into account inflation?
It does not. And so that is something, Evan had on one of his slides, that we are projecting that out at 24 year 24 cost estimates. So there's a lot of variables, and we could have chosen to do an inflated numbers, but the numbers in front of you are just holding steady with 24 cost figures.
Okay. So earlier in the presentation, you said there were 1,500 property sidewalks that were repaired from 2019 to 2023. How many miles did we?
That's a good question. Is Jake Baldwin on? No. So when I had talked to Jake about kind of tracking miles, because that was one of the things that I wanted to track for moving forward, is if we were doing full block and repair replacement, how much could we anticipate doing annually? And unfortunately, that wasn't something that they tracked early on in the sidewalk improvement program. And I don't know the exact reasoning, but I think in the first couple years of the program, they actually did it based on areas and not prioritized routes. So it was a lot of spot repairs here and there, where it was sections, small sections versus kind of linear feet or square feet. And that's the answer that I got from Jake, unless maybe Melinda knows that answer better than I do. I think she was going to be on tonight.
Good evening, Commissioners. I do not have that number off the top of my head, but I was trying to look it up on our Connected City scorecard, because we did start measuring the miles of compliance, or at least the percentage, which we did have some quantities on length for that over the last couple of years. So I'm trying to track down that information, but I don't have it pulled up yet.
Okay, thank you. You said you reviewed or inspected 400 miles of sidewalk. Is that all of our sidewalks, 400 miles, or is that the entire city?
Yeah, so that's all existing infrastructure that's currently in the right-of-way. So that includes sidewalks and shared use paths that are in the right-of-way. So that would include your shared use paths that run along some of our major arterials. So all of our existing infrastructure is 400 plus miles.
Okay, yeah, I thought it'd be more than that.
Yeah.
I'm not asking for more. That's all I got.
Do we have a estimate on, I mean, I know as we started this priority system, to me, it's noticeable that we're getting, the major streets, in some of the major areas. I mean, of that 400 miles, or of the 280 miles that need improvement, any estimate on how many of those are in the priority network, and how many of those are outside the priority network?
That's a good question. We have run some, obviously we have the dashboard that shows kind of where our deficiencies are and what areas are most accessible and least accessible, and we can get that to you. But I can tell you that obviously the areas where we know have the most work to do are going to be in our residential areas.
Yeah.
Obviously, along major arterials and collectors, they've had either standalone CIP projects over the year, or pedestrian improvement projects, or things like that. So those tend to always get addressed first, or areas that are close to schools and things like that. So just by looking at kind of the areas of most concern would probably be our residential areas at this moment. I don't know if that answers the question. I might have just avoided it. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't think you avoided it. I'd be curious, as we allocate dollars, I mean, we've known that obviously, doing sidewalks on Kentucky, for example, or down 9th Street, I mean, obviously those are hitting a lot of highly used routes, but obviously we're paying for that, as opposed to pick a residential street that I can't even name the name of, that, might not have the same priority. I just kind of wondered how we compare those, and how much, if that tells us anything about the overall cost of this program. Maybe I'm not saying that very well, but like my neighborhood doesn't have sidewalks at all. But we have lots of people who walk because it's on the streets. I'm not saying that's the perfect example, but you compare that to a neighborhood that has sidewalks that aren't very good, but it's also a place where people can use the roads at leisure because it's purely residential. I'm just trying to get a feel for how much of it's that versus how much of it is 9th Street, Kentucky Street, Tennessee, that sort.
Yeah, I mean, so within the prioritization model, it does have kind of the pedestrian demand where you're looking at kind of how close are you, or how within walking distance are you close to kind of some of these amenities.
Yeah.
Then you also have the transportation disadvantage, which also helps us take into where we're going to be, or routes that should be prioritized. So that typically is more neighborhood driven because it's demographics of low income, zero vehicle households, people with disabilities. So that's going to pull in more of your residential, where pedestrian demand is probably going to be more of your kind of arterials and collectors, where the transportation disadvantage can help pull in some of that other matrix as well.
Looks like Darren might have something to add.
Maybe Darren.
Hi, Commissioner Finkelday. Darren Haig here. So our pedestrian demand model is or prioritization model was built off of, a lot of those factors like the walk routes to schools. And so we had to put in some rules into this model to model potential pedestrian movements to businesses and schools and everything. So how it prioritizes, it aggregates all these households that could potentially be walking to that school, and then gives us an overall score. And then how we broke that down is if we needed to look at 20 years, we really just kind of broke that down into 20 different groupings. So the highest grouping would be these are the ones that we would need to look at in year 1 out of a 20-year plan. And there wasn't really we didn't really have priority buckets. It was more based on a 20-year program or a 10-year program, like what sections of town would we need to look at. And then with the equity and the transportation disadvantage, we ran it with not the assumption that the sidewalk was in that neighborhood necessarily, but that the trip that was taken started in that neighborhood. So if somebody in a transportation disadvantaged neighborhood started that trip there, walked outside of the neighborhood, that entire trip got rated at a higher score, even if part of the sidewalk was not in that transportation disadvantaged neighborhood. So say the bus stop might be 2 blocks outside of that neighborhood, their route there would get a higher prioritization. Does that make sense?
That's helpful. Thank you very much.
That's basically what I said.
Engineers make it sound better.
Yeah, there you go.
Any additional questions? Well, I just had one. I just wanted to ask if that 20-year projection cycle is customary, or could it be spread out to 25 to mitigate costs or anything?
It could. I mean, so when we started the process, one of the things I did is I looked at transition plans or comprehensive plans kind of locally, regionally, nationally, and tried to figure out kind of communities about our size based on kind of our starting point too, because obviously we have a lot more work to do than some other communities that have had comprehensive programs for many, many years. We originally thought somewhere in that 15 to 25 based on kind of the size of our community and miles of sidewalks and curb ramps that we needed to repair, and we kind of settled on 20. But I mean, I think that we'd be willing to explore other options. The problem is the further you get out, you do a 25-year plan, then by the time you get to 25, the sidewalks that you did in year 1 and the curb ramps are, needing additional work again. So I mean, it's something that we could look at.
Okay. Just was curious. Any additional questions? All right, not seeing any. I'll open it up to public comment. Not seeing any public comment in here. Sherry, online or Zoom?
No, ma'am.
Okay, bringing it back to us for further discussion or final points.
Yeah, just thank you for the work. It's one of these moving target type situations. I am curious as to how many miles we've repaired in that 4 years, because I was here on the commission when all that, we went through that whole situation, and a lot of gnashing of teeth, as we all know. So I'd like to know what progress we actually made. That'd be great.
not to bring up the code redevelopment every time I can, but, obviously, one of the goals of the code, the new development code is to have more infill and more, density inside the city limits, which obviously could have a higher rate of development-related sidewalk repair. And, I think no one knows exactly what the code will do and how it will be applied. And certainly in year one, it will take people a ways to see that. But I think as we look at this plan, I guess, those early years, I think we want to at least keep in mind that some of the, we might see more development, so we might have more partnerships, we might have more of these sidewalks repaired as part of redevelopments than we've traditionally had. And I think that could be true on, major streets, but also on residential streets. And that might have some impact as we look into the future years about the cost of that. So at least something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's a great point. I'd like to just comment on that. The aging infrastructure that we talked about, the money we spend now, 25 years from now, may need some repair, 40 years may need full replacement, but we shouldn't stop from doing that. Ironically, the areas of town that we need it the most, according to some things I've seen, are the sidewalks in the oldest part of town, and those are the areas that we need to redevelop the most. Those are the areas that are going to be the most financially beneficial for the city to redevelop because of the existing infrastructure, and we get the added benefit of more accessibility because we have these new improvements, we have new intersections, we have regulated and mandated improvements. So to me, this is a great add-on to us densifying and utilizing these resources. Plus, we get the added bonus, like you said, the developer, the contractor, the redeveloper ends up paying a lot of these costs as a part of their redevelopment plan. So I think we'll be able to get more bang for the buck from partners, and then we also need to help contribute to the fund as well on the other parts of the corners and the major infrastructure. So I'm excited to see these changes. I've noticed the improvements throughout the town the last 4 years, and I'm encouraged to see it move forward.
I guess I would add, MSO is great at these statistics and figuring out. I mean, we are investing more in stormwater. We're investing more in, and again, to your point, some of the areas we're investing stormwater in, for example, or investing in new water lines, are those areas that might also have very poor sidewalks. Mm-hmm. I think of some of the big projects going down Louisiana and all those. I mean, I just wonder if there is, someone like Darren could, map out our CIP, thinking about overlaying our CIP on water projects and road projects, and how that overlaps against our sidewalk projects, and if that's going to, give us more ability to attack this, but with different funds as we go, and how that's built in, as opposed to having the $5 million in the general fund. You say, am I making sense of what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I could see that, we might be attacking this from different funds for different reasons. Might be worth considering how that impacts the general fund.
Melinda, I believe.
Yes, I just wanted to give some additional information on that. We do overlay those now. However, if we're doing a waterline project or sanitary project or storm, we do bring in sidewalk funds from our sidewalk programs. So some of that funding comes from capital sales tax. Some of that does come from the general fund, depending on the program we're pulling from. But we don't typically use, utility funds to pay for extended sidewalk repairs, only if we're just putting back sidewalk, where we had to maybe access a water line to do a repair or something like that. If it's new ramps that have to be put in as part of a utility project, then we pull from our ADA ramp program right now. So I just wanted to add some clarification on what funding we use for our sidewalk right now.
So that's a good question to clarify in my mind. Like, I was driving down 6th Street today, and obviously they've pulled out all sorts of stuff to put water lines in, and clearly they've pulled out ramps or curbs or whatever. If there wasn't a curb there when they pulled it out and they were going back in, are you saying we use our sidewalk fund to add that ramp, don't use the utility fund to add that ramp?
Correct. We do our best to do that, assign only our water line funds to our water line line items, and then a portion of the different funds will pay for the overarching things like demolition, mobilization, those types of things. But we tie it back. If it is a debt-funded project, however, it can include multiple things like pavement, storm, sidewalks. So depending on which portion of 6th Street, I know we have a lot going on 6th Street, some of that's paid with sidewalk program funds, some of that is paid through our authorizing debt resolution, and so we have some temp notes, we have street maintenance funds, stormwater funds, about every fund possible that can be used for infrastructure is probably being used somewhere on the 6th Street corridor right now.
And without being specific to 6th Street, but if there was a water project that pulled out a ramp that maybe was, the ramp was there, maybe it's a Category 2 ramp that just is 20 years old or cracking, would the sidewalk, I mean, would the utility repair go to put back in that sidewalk, or put back in that ramp that it took out, or not?
Yes, it would if that ramp is being touched because we have to do the water line project. Now, if we're replacing water line on one side of the street and a ramp there, and we decide to do all the ramps, then we bring in other funds to do the other ramps.
Okay, that's helpful. That makes sense. Thank you.
Well, I will, second Commissioner Finkeldine and Vice Mayor Dever. The need is there, and you can clearly see that, and we have made substantial progress and recently, and I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more about the kind of prioritization and how dynamic it is, because it seems like it's pretty dynamic, kind of a movable object on there of addressing particular areas. So. But yeah, I really am encouraged by the work so far. You guys have put a great deal of work into this. It's pretty obvious, and look forward to seeing it. Anything, Commissioner Larson?
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Give you an opportunity to go ahead and leave. All right, that'll bring us to the city manager's report. Item G. Craig?
Thank you, Mayor. We have a city's lead line service inventory program update on there, the utility billing report, which we usually have, and then future agenda items. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for Craig?
I think so. Thank you.
Not seeing any. As a public comment item on the city manager's report, open it up for public comment. Any comment here in the room?
Maybe the city manager would like to report how much debt we have. I just had an interesting conversation about that.
Not seeing any additional public comment. Sherry, any public comment on Zoom?
No, Mayor.
Okay. We'll bring it back and.
I would just.
Go ahead.
For the record, the June 18th meeting, I'm going to be online. I'll be out, but I'll be online for that June 18th meeting. It's the CIP, so I don't want to miss that.
Okay.
And then the August 6th meeting, I will be out of town and not online to the extent that affects anything. as we go forward. August 6th, I'll be out of town and unavailable.
That was August 6th, and what was the other one?
June 18th, but I'll be online for that.
Okay, okay. All right. Moving us on to any additional comments? Not seeing any. Moving us on to item H, general public comment. The public is allowed to speak on items or issues or items that are scheduled for discussion on the agenda. Comments should be limited to issues and items germane to the business of the governing body. The commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor will the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Members of the public will be limited to 3 minutes for comments. Now opening up the public comment.
Let's try this again.
Yeah, thank you for being patient.
All right. As I stated earlier, my name's Alex Tempe. I live in 66046. It's been brought to my attention that the firefighters union is currently pressuring you to hire more firefighters. I may have a solution to that. So there is a federal grant called Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response, otherwise known as SAFER, put on by FEMA. Their main objective is to aid local fire departments in staffing. And from what I've seen, the average award from FEMA is approximately $3.25 million. So that could be more than enough to have some negotiating power and bargaining with the firefighters union to bring more firefighters in. Unfortunately for fiscal year 2024, the deadline has already passed, so we'll have to wait until next year. I believe the deadline is in mid-March, so something to keep in mind going forward. The range from awards has been as low as $293,000 all the way up to $27 million. With Lawrence, the size of it is, it could be more than the average, but I cannot say for certain since that is outside of my jurisdiction. As per usual with any other of your federal programs, they are subject to regular single audit requirements, so just keep in mind with that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Going to give you some definitions. Vitriol. Something as spoken or written words thought to be harsh or burning as acid. Kind of like when I was saying that there was a chief sitting over here that I said was an arrogant motherfucker and you threw me out a couple weeks ago. Attack. Set upon or work forcefully. I've come in here and tried to work forcefully on a number of different issues. Been fucking ignored. How about attack used as an adjective? Expressing or involving aggressively negative or harsh criticism of someone. Last but not least at all is freedom. The absence of necessity, coercion, or constraint of choice or action. For the last several weeks in here, there has been coercion and constraint in the choices of action with our freedoms in here. I've been threatened with arrest twice in the last 2 weeks because I said somebody over in this area of the room was a arrogant motherfucker. Your city manager right there is another arrogant motherfucker. I suppose we're done with that now, right? Why can't you be a man, Bart, and actually answer the emails I've sent over the last couple weeks? I've sent several messages to the city commissioners asking for clarification of this rule that I was threatened with, and basically explained to them that tonight was the night that they were either going to arrest me or back the fuck down. 5922, it's KSA 215922, which has been illegally used in here in the presence of your city fucking attorney as well. I I didn't knowingly deny any lawful rights of such official or employee to lawfully enter a building or use the facilities. I didn't knowingly impede through the use of restraint, abduction, or coercion or intimidation by force. I didn't knowingly refuse or fail to leave after committing a crime in here, threatens to commit or incites others. I didn't knowingly impede after an act of intrusion, and I never intruded in here. So now that we've dispensed with this bullshit, the next thing we're going to do is start working on the Second Amendment. Because our freedoms are going to be real in here. Unless you can guarantee to me that all the guns are kept out of here, mine's going to be allowed.
Time.
Test me.
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. I saw a video from last meeting where you violated Michael Irby's First Amendment right to free speech when you interrupted and then prevented him from continuing to speak during his designated 3 minutes of public comment, and then you had him forcibly removed from the meeting under threat of arrest from Lawrence Police Department for the charge of disrupting a public meeting because Michael said, while being interrupted repeatedly by you, Mayor Littlejohn, he said, "Look at that motherfucker right there. I can look wherever the fuck I want. That motherfucker right there brought you in here a manipulated situation. That motherfucker right there, and I'll look over there as much as I want. You keep interrupting me, Bart. Go ahead. Keep making it worse. Somebody better stop him, because you're all in it if you don't. Look at that arrogant fucker. Look at that arrogant fucker. Bart, I'm telling you to look at that arrogant fucker. I can look wherever I want in this room. Look at that arrogant fucker. Look at that arrogant fucker." So I have a question about that. Why do I get to say that same thing right now? Michael said that, and it got him removed from the meeting. So sometimes things are allowed to be said, but sometimes they're not. Based on what? How are we supposed to know what's allowed and not allowed when you've given yourself such discretion to curb speech in here, to put guide rails on free speech when it's supposed to simply be free speech without restrictions? And all under the threat of the Lawrence Police Department blindly and dutifully following your unlawful directives to remove citizens under a snap decision of disrupting a meeting. Talk about chilling speech. All right, so am I allowed to say that because I'm quoting from what he said at a previous meeting? All right, so right now, could I say right here, right now, look at that motherfucker right there. I can look wherever the fuck I want. That motherfucker right there brought you in here a manipulated situation. That motherfucker right there, and I'll look over there as much as I want. You keep interrupting me, Bart. Go ahead, keep making it worse. Somebody better stop him, because you're all in it if you don't. Look at that arrogant fucker. Look at that arrogant fucker. Bart, I'm telling you, look at that arrogant fucker. I can look wherever I want in this room. Look at that arrogant fucker. Look at that arrogant fucker. Could I say that?
Looks like there is no more additional public comment here in the room. Sherry, any online or in Zoom?
Stephen Watts.
Hi. Excuse me. Okay for the guy finding grant monies for the firefighters to fund us, but good luck in getting any cooperation from them in terms of reviewing the data. You know, last week's meeting had a promise to provide the 5-year claims relative to the insurance for police matters, and nothing has been received. Nothing. This is what happens when you guys ask them to do something and it just sits. Can I stop and ask? When is that going to happen? Please? Can I get an answer, or I'm wasting my time, Bart? I mean, if I'm just wasting my time, please stop it.
I believe, Sherry, did you stop it beforehand?
Oh, his time? I'm sorry. No, I did not. Wanting.
Could you roll it back to, I think it was approximately, we were silent for about 25 seconds, give him that much?
I don't have that ability, but I can let it run 5 seconds longer.
I think that's about approximately what it was, Stephen, right?
Yeah, well, that's good enough, Bart. I appreciate it, but you can appreciate it. What good is it if you guys don't see yourselves as interfacing? You know, the next issue is, where are the town travel reports since September 2023? Can I get an employment in a place where you don't have to provide what you're required to do? I mean, I've never seen a government that allows that. Let's see, September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May. 8 months, brother. You know, on a different vein, hey, thank goodness the MSO were very responsible and has been. Ms. Sieben has been extremely responsive in some matters, and the street got swept today. Excellent. You look at this other stuff, a lot of nonsense going on about sustainability. Okay, I sent you guys emails about this. What good is a sustainability website if when you click on a link, the stuff doesn't work? Where it says, okay, what can you do as a citizen? Well, the button for save natural gas, it doesn't work. Save electricity button, it doesn't work. Calculate energy, it doesn't work. The wind energy button, it doesn't work. Live Well Lawrence button, man, that doesn't work. And even the local farmers markets button doesn't work. Come on, man. Why can't there be answers to these questions in terms of why this doesn't work? If we cannot do the simple nuts and bolts, and over the citizenry is turned over to the internet website saying, use the web pages. Okay, and even in the spirit of saying, wow, it's 10 million acres long, I understand you can't keep track of everything. Here's some help. I'm going to say it now. They don't fucking want it. Thank you.
Lou Skunk.
Hi, this is Betty Lou. I was just wanting to talk about last week's meeting. I thought y'all were going to stop broadcasting public comment live, but I saw it last week. My 8-year-old grandson had been wanting to watch Lawrence City Commission for months, but I wouldn't let him watch because of people using naughty words during public comment. But when I read in the papers that y'all would stop streaming it live, I let him watch last week. But then when public comment came up, you didn't stop the feed and he heard curse words. He's an impressionable young boy. Little Johnny, come over here and tell the mayor hi. Here, I'm putting him on now. Say hi, little Johnny. Suck my dick, you mayor. You dope fucking son of a bitch. Little Johnny, you can't talk to the mayor like that. I'm so sorry, mayor, for that. But now you see my problem. He's been cussing up a storm ever since last week. He got suspended from school because he called his teacher a fart-sniffing cunt. When she asked him what he just said because she was shocked, he said, and I quote, "What, are you deaf? Or do you just need to clean the principal's cum out of your ear?" This city commission has corrupted my grandson's mind. This is worse than when I let him watch the county commission meetings and he started calling everyone a beta male pussy. I think it's fucking bullshit that y'all expose my grandson to such filth. Why, oh why didn't you just stop the live feed like you said you would? Now what are you motherfuckers gonna do about it? Anyways, that's all I wanted to say. Little Johnny, come tell the nice commissioners bye. Smell you later, shitheads.
That's all the public comment, Mayor.
All right. Item I, commission items. Any commission items?
Sir.
Gentleman earlier about the fire grants, I just wanted to inquire about that. Oh, no, I'm just bringing it up as a commission item. That seems somewhat familiar to kind of something we've been looking at before?
Yes, we've aggressively pursued safer grants many, many times, and we don't always get funded, but it is something we've looked at several times, and I think we've received them in the past. Yeah.
May I ask how long you've been looking at them?
I can go ahead and direct. How long have you, sorry, how long have you been looking at them?
In Lawrence, before my tenure, I'm sure that they applied. Most cities do of our size. I've applied for them in other cities. So, I mean, not personally, ever since the SAFER program came into being in the 90s, I think, or 2000s.
But we continuously, go
Yeah, definitely. It does come with some strings if these need to be new positions that you have to fund, and so not always are we in a place where we want to grow our population, but we are in a growth mode here in this city. So cities like Lawrence do usually get aggressive with those, but they're not always funded. It's very competitive, and they're not always funded.
Okay, thank you.
Why you didn't apply for it?
That's a warning for you. Please be quiet on that. So any additional commission items? Commission calendar.
Looks good.
Yeah, looks good. All right.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
I have a first and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes 4 and 1 absent. We are adjourned.
My God, Bart, you can't even avoid your prejudice for one night? You almost got there.